Hello everyone to the community meeting of owasp-dependency-check for May 2026. Thanks as always for joining. For the organizational part that we always have here, the community meetings are being recorded and they will be uploaded to YouTube afterwards. The slides are being published or will be published to the community repository in the Dependency-Track organization on GitHub. Please use the Zoom chat during the presentation if you have any questions, but there will be an open Q&A section towards the end where you can ask, where you can unmute yourself, ask me questions, ask the other attendees questions, whatever you prefer. As for the agenda for today, I will give a broad update of version 5, of the upcoming version 5. I will show you the new documentation that we've been working on, and I will detail the GA plan for version 5, which finally is materializing. And then, as promised, the Q&A section towards the end. I did not include a version 4 release section this time. Just know there will be a version 4.14.2 release shortly, probably tomorrow, with a few bug fixes. I just didn't bother putting in slides today. But if you have questions about that, just let me know. First off, again, elephant in the room. I think just as last month, we aimed for GA by the end of last month, so by the end of April. Of course, now it's May. GA is not here, so there you have it. I will not try to find excuses like last time, but just know we are very, very close to getting this done, finally. So let's just go right into the updates. What has happened since last time? We aggressively cut down on technical debt, and this essentially means any features that we started while working on version 5 that did not come to a final form, that did not reach a stable status, we cut some of them out just because they become a maintenance burden if we just keep them in and people start relying on them, right? Otherwise, like just technical debt that we carried over from version 4, also removed that, and we have been deleting a lot of code during this effort. We ported changes from version 4 up to the next upcoming version 4 bug fix release. We still need to port those things, those issues over, just because this version has not been released yet, naturally. We implemented vulnerability policy management via UI. Previously, you could only do this via bundles that you had to configure via config files, and that were then pulled in asynchronously by a job. Now you can do it via UI. We implemented the ability to filter notifications using cell expressions. I will show you both the vulnerability policy management UI and the notification filter expressions in a moment in the UI, and we'll explain more what they are for. We made UX improvements or user experience improvements for the component search, the global policy violation view, and the global vulnerability audit views. They all shared the same problem, namely that there are too many filters that users may want to use, and showing them all at once basically makes it very hard to parse what the hell is even going on. I will also show you how that has improved in a moment. We had to switch from Liquibase to Flyway for database migrations. Of course, this is not really user-facing, but the reason for having to do this is because Liquibase has decided to adopt a non-OSI approved license, so it's technically not open source anymore. And that, of course, is a problem for a project like Dependency-Track, which is permissively licensed and maintained under an open foundation like OWASP. So we just made the switch to Flyway, which still is permissively licensed under Apache 2. We also reworked the package metadata resolution to be more repository friendly. You may have noticed if you follow the software supply chain general realm on social media or wherever else, that the people at Sonatype have been posting a lot about Maven Central being kind of abused by consumers because they don't cache the information that they pull from there or the artifacts that they pull from those registries. I think one of the main blog posts by Sonatype was about the tragedy of the commons, meaning Maven Central is a common or is a public resource, right? Everyone gets to use it. Everyone gets to use it for free. And there are tools like Dependency-Track or like other scanners or even your build tools that pull data from there do not cache properly and thus like make the experience worse for everyone else. Just noting here, we were not approached by anyone or any registry saying we were bad consumers, but still we took this as an opportunity to like revisit how we pull information from repositories, which includes like the latest versions, hashes, published timestamps, etc. So this has been greatly improved. We are now contacting repositories way less often, and we're using, for lack of better words, caching primitives to avoid pulling data from the repositories if it's not necessary. There's an ADR linked here again. If like afterwards you're interested in reading more about this, you will be able to click the link when the slides become available. We also worked on version 4 to version 5 migration tooling, which of course we promised for the GA release. Making good progress there. It has not yet been published, but it will be shortly. And we will, of course, update the documentation accordingly when that happens. Oops, didn't want to do that. I will just quickly move my window over so I can see better. And then I will show you a few things in the UI. So one thing I mentioned is we reworked the component search UI. And what this means is we adopted in many views in version 5 something called filter pills. You may have seen this in other applications. So instead of showing all the filters you can possibly use at once, you now get this indicator here saying add a filter. And you could, for example, add a filter that filters by a group. And you could technically, if we were to support multiple operators here, in this case, it's just contains, you could select what exactly you want to filter on, right? Or what semantics you want. Here is contains again. So let's say I'm searching for Jackson and it filters by Jackson in the group. Let me just get rid of the CPE part here. So as you accumulate like filters on here, or if you are searching for hashes, you select the hash type and then the hash value. Of course, this will not produce any results here, right? But as the filters accumulate, you can dismiss them one by one. And as soon as you have like one or two or more, there's also a clear all filter option here. So this makes it a little bit easier to explore what filters are available. The view that you're interested in is much more concise, I would say. Also, something you don't see is we reworked how this search works in the back end. It is now much, much more efficient. As you can see here already, I have over 10,000 components that match my current filters. You can imagine if you have like a huge portfolio with millions of components, filtering over them becomes quite expensive, and especially like paging across all of them, right? If you were to do it. So in the background, this has been much improved performance-wise. Also, like related for, there's no data in here right now to show, but the same filtering options have been adopted for the global vulnerability audit. Like previously, you had an entire column on the left-hand side that showed all the possible filters you could possibly want, and they are now like conveniently hidden just for you to select and dismiss individually if you want. Yeah, for policy management, I mentioned the vulnerability policy view is now available. So the normal policies are remained as before, and I demoed a bit about this in earlier community meetings. But now there is, let me just delete this one. Now there's a vulnerability policies view here. And if you click here, it takes you to a multi-tab view, if you will, just because there are multiple things that you need to provide. But say you name the policy foo, you get to choose, should this apply? Like, should this take effect when I save it? Should it only produce logs when it matches, or should it be disabled so I can work on it in peace and then decide to enable it when I think it's ready? You can like provide priorities. So if you have multiple policies, you can provide a priority to influence which matches first if multiple were to match, right? You can provide an author here that gets pre-populated in my case, provide a description. You can even say from when to when this vulnerability policy is valid, or when it will be applicable. And this can be useful for risk acceptance, right? If you only want to suppress something, for example, for a given period of time and then have it resurface after the time, you can do it via these valid from and valid until pickers. The conditions are cell expressions or common expression language expressions. There's a reference here that takes you both to the language reference and gives you the variables that you can use. It's expandable, I guess is the correct word here. We have a few predetermined templates that you can use to give you ideas. So let's say you want to suppress by vulnerability ID. It will provide you a template which you can just fill out with your custom IDs if you want. But of course, there's autocomplete here as the last time I showed, which gives you like all the fields that you can access. And yeah, so let's just say I go with this one. If I were to save, it will take me here because the vulnerability policy needs an analysis, right? It basically takes the same fields that you can use in the vulnerability audit view for projects. So the idea being here, let's say I want to suppress something because it's a false positive. I select false positive here and suppress. And now I can save it, and now it will take effect. When a vulnerability is found, this policy will match given the condition that I provided matches, and it will automatically triage the finding as false positive and suppress it, even before notification is sent. Oh yeah, something else that might be interesting that I think I didn't show before. Version 5 has retention settings for both metrics and for projects. You can see the metrics retention defaults to 90 days. If metrics or if you go past 90 days, we will drop the metrics data, right? And this is just a measure to keep the database from growing forever. We have a similar mechanism for projects. So the way this works is you can instruct Dependency-Track to delete projects that are inactive. And there are multiple or two choices you have here. One is based on age. And you can say when a project has been inactive for, in this case, 30 days, delete it. Or you could say by version. And here you would say keep only 2 of the inactive versions of a project. And you can, of course, like increase or decrease as you please. But the shared theme among them is you need to mark projects as inactive, otherwise they will not become eligible for retention enforcement. Yeah, you will also notice here in the settings, if you've ever used the settings panel in Dependency-Track, previously there was no indication of if you have made changes and didn't save them. There was no reset functionality. Now there is one. You can see the badge up here, unsaved changes, and I can just reset my ill-advised configuration that I did here, for example. And this is just like the same for everywhere else, right? It's available across all the different settings panels here. Yeah, I think that is most of what I wanted to share. Oh no, sorry. For notifications, I mentioned the filters. So let me just create one here with my favorite name as always for console. This is basically the view that you know from version 4 with the difference. Let me just subscribe here to a new vulnerability. There's now a filter expression view here that when you click it, you will see a similar view to what I showed you for the vulnerability policies. Again, like what fields are available here. It's a cell expression window. I missed to explain that before. It's a cell expression window. You get the expression reference, link to the language reference as before, templates. And the purpose of this really is that we were getting feature requests for users who were subscribing to, let's say, the new vulnerability notification and who were drowning in noise, right? They were notified about vulnerabilities with only like medium severity, low severity, unknown severity, when in fact they only cared about critical or highs. And like instead of adding more and more filter options to the UI or like tick boxes, whatever else, that would not have scaled if you anticipate the other options that users might want to filter by, right? So instead, we just give you this filtering option here. You get the same power as you get for policies, and you can just filter notifications by whatever you want, essentially. So that's a way how you can reduce the noise of notifications. That's everything I wanted to share here. I did not want to end the sharing. Perfect. Let me move this over. I'm getting a little bit of screen glare here. Damn the sun. Alrighty, so moving on to the new documentation. Right, so we know that the documentation that we have for version 4 is not really, let's say, complete, not very easy to explore, and we wanted to work on that for version 5. So we worked on new documentation that will target version 5. However, we will not consider completeness of the documentation a GA blocker for version 5, right? I will show you a little bit of what exactly I mean with this. But basically, this will not hold up the timeline. That's the short version of it. It will be maintained in a separate docs repository, not with the main code anymore. It is currently deployed at the URL that you see here. It will be versioned, like there will be instead of next, there will be a latest or a 5.0.0 part for the URL. So you can refer to specific versions of the documentation as well. We adopted something called the diataxis framework to ensure the structure is proper. And again, I will show you what exactly that means. And like this QR code here that will take you to the URL where it is currently deployed to. Please, if you are planning on using version 5, or if you are a current dependency track user, which I assume you are if you're joining this meeting or if you watch the video, please check out the documentation. Let us know if something sucks, if something is underexplained, if something is missing. Like any feedback is good feedback, because like as people who are working on this project, we sometimes miss or misjudge what is useful to know for users, right? So we are really reliant on what you need. But let me just show you a little bit how the documentation page now looks like. And again, it's not fully complete, so please bear with me. The landing page, for example, is not complete yet. It doesn't quite explain what dependency track is really, but the main structure is here. You will notice there are 4 main sections. It's tutorials, guides, concepts, and reference. And these are the, let's say, 4 pillars of the diataxis framework, right? The idea is that in tutorials, you get step-by-step like guides that walk you through a workflow. For example, here creating a component policy, setting up notifications, right? There's a specific goal that you want to achieve, and this thing takes you through all the necessary steps, including screenshots and URLs and whatever you have to input here. The goal is really for you to learn how to use the software. And there will be, of course, more tutorials here. For example, how do I upload a BOM? How do I create a project? How do I create a project hierarchy, etc., etc., etc. Then for guides, these are more like task oriented, right? You want to achieve a certain goal, and these are more formal, I would say. These are currently divided between user guides, so stuff that is user facing that you can do via the UI, and administration guides. That is for the operators of dependency track. What do they need to keep in mind when they run this thing? There's a separate section also for upgrades. So whenever a new version is released and you need to take certain steps or specific steps or manual action, whatever, there are upgrade guides as well. And there will be an upgrade guide for every single version, ideally. Here as well, the guides, especially the user guides, are currently a bit thin. We are working on this on the side. I'm currently working on the how do I manage projects guide, for example. But most of the operator side stuff or the administration facing stuff is already pretty complete, I would say. And this includes things you need to keep in mind when deploying to production, right? How many resources do you need to allocate? What do you need to keep in mind for scaling horizontally, right? Putting TLS in front of the API server, configuring authentication with OIDC or LDAP. Like all of these things that we previously did not have, they are now in here. If you then, after deploying to production, you hit like walls, it doesn't perform quite as much as you wanted, there's a scaling guide that walks you through like what can you do to make this thing serve more users, serve more bomb uploads, whatever you want. Also more targeted stuff like how the hell do I configure an HTTP proxy? Sounds basic, but we didn't have this before, and we were getting questions for how to do it over and over again. Instead of just having one huge FAQ article, there's now a separate guide for every single one of these things. Then for concepts like that will explain like what even is a project, how does access control work in Dependency-Track, how do the flows work, what are teams, what are even notifications, how do the time series metrics work in this thing, and also architecture stuff. Like this is concept level knowledge that will be available here in the fittingly named concepts section. Then for reference, this is just things that you can refer to, that you can deep link to if you, let's say, are working with the REST API. Sadly, this thing is a little bit bugged. It needs a reload. We are embedding the OpenAPI spec in here for both the version 1 of the API, including all of the endpoints. Same thing for the new version 2 of the API. Includes instructions for how do I authenticate, how does paging work, how are errors returned, stuff like that. Of course, in reference for how the application can be configured, what options do you have, what like you can use expressions, how do I load property values from files, all of this is available here. There is a complete reference of all the various settings that you can provide to the application. Everything is hyperlinkable, deep linkable. So there are, like, if you want to send something to your operations team or the other way around, this is now a lot easier. It's all divided into sections, so it's easier to discover. For every single entry in here, there's the accompanying environment variable notation of the name. So that makes container deployments a lot easier to do. Yeah, again, still working on this. It will not be complete for GA, pretty sure, just because there's so much surface to cover, and we didn't have complete documentation before. But I think already what we have right now is better than what we had before, and going forward, it will only get better, I think. So, yep. Going back. For the version 5 GA plan. Bear with me, this will be a little bit chaotic, possibly, but for the GA plan, we have a few constraints that make it a little bit more tricky than hoped. One of those things is that version 5 was developed in separate repositories, right? And the Git history has diverged. We did this because that allowed us to manage pull requests separately, not disturb the daily operations of the latest version. So we created separate repositories for this. Of course, now the challenge is Git history has diverged. We cannot just cleanly merge back, right? A hard cut over would be very disturbing or would be breaking for many users, just because if you consider that many users would pin their container images to the latest tag, if we now switch the latest tag to version 5, which requires a migration, their setup would break, right? We cannot do that. We also want to support version 4.14.x for up to 6 months after GA, just to give everyone a grace period. Still supply bug fixes. And due to all of this, we want the upgrade to version 5 to be a conscious decision, right? If it was automatic, As I mentioned before, the migration requires manual action. It is not possible in place, sadly. If we were to do this automatically, stuff would break, and we don't want to do that. So, walking you through the changes that you would be seeing while we are on our way to GA, if that makes sense. First one would be repository moves. Currently, version 5 is maintained in the Hades API server, Hades frontend, and Hades repository. What will be happening is we will be moving Hades API server to the Dependency-Track repository, to the main Dependency-Track repository. Hades frontend will become Dependency-Track frontend, and the standalone Hades repository will just be discontinued and archived. In general, the old repositories will only be archived. They will not be deleted. We will be adding notices to the READMEs, so they clearly state, hey, this repository is archived. They have been moved somewhere else, right? And here you can find the up-to-date code. The release assets in those repositories will stay around. So everyone who used them before or who relied on them for whatever reason can still access them. There will just be no new artifacts on those repositories. And because they are read-only, no changes can be made. With regard to versioning, currently the Hades API server and Hades frontend artifacts are versioned as 5.7.x, which is unfortunate, and we will be reversioning them to 5.0.0. And the Hades standalone version will also be just discontinued. Yes, it was kind of dumb to version the Hades things as 5.x. In hindsight, that was not very smart, but the good news is that we can just reset to version 5 because we are also switching the repositories. So there's no breaking behavior here for anyone. It's just a little bit confusing, that's all. Container image renames, pretty obvious. Following the repository renames, Hades API server will just become API server. Hades frontend will just become Hades frontend. They will be available through both Docker Hub, which is without the registry in the front, and the GitHub container registry, which is with ghcr.io in the front. Regarding container image tags, this is, I guess, the most exciting one or the most important one. The latest tag will stay at version 4 until version 4 becomes end of life, right? So roughly 6 months after which version 5 becomes GA, latest will still point to version 4. Snapshot, without any qualifier in addition, will also continue to point to version 4. And that, again, is just for people who currently use those tags to not break stuff. Version 4.14.x, etc., like everything under version 4, will continue to point to version 4 releases, kind of self-explanatory. For version 5, we will have :5, :5.0, :5.0.0, and so on and so forth, going forward for the version 5. There will be a 5- snapshot to separate the version 5 snapshot from the version 4 snapshot. On the same vein, we will introduce a version 4 snapshot, which we will encourage you to switch to if you're currently using just snapshot. And there will be, before version 5 becomes finally GA with 5.0.0, there may be release candidate releases, which then, of course, would point to version 5 release candidates. So one thing that is not listed here, I just realized, is that, under notes, snapshot will just be discontinued entirely once version 4 becomes EOL. After that, you should use 5- snapshot going forward. And this is just to avoid confusion with what snapshot actually points to. While we are working on the GA switchover, cutover, there will be a period where the version 4 master branches will be frozen, and we will not accept any more changes that will go into those branches. All contributions that target version 4, be it bug fix releases or anything else, will have to target version 4.14.x, or there's a branch named like this, right? Before we enforce this, or before we put this in effect, we will publish notices for and instructions for contributors that clearly explains why is this happening, what do I have to do to like repoint or rebase my pull request to the new branch, etc., etc. There will be banners for this in the README that clearly show why this is happening, etc. There will be a migration.md file that will walk through all of this in more detail. And we will probably create a pinned GitHub issue or a discussion that also explains this. I hope this will be sufficient to everyone for everyone to see, but we will see how that will play out. Once this is done, the dependency track and front-end repositories currently use master as the main branch. What will happen for the GA switchover is version 5 will be published to a main branch, and that main branch will become the default. Default meaning that is what you will see when you visit the repository and when you clone it without providing a specific branch. The master branch, currently used by version 4, will either be frozen, like read-only, no more merges, or deleted entirely. Not sure what the best strategy there is, but the point being, main going forward will point to version 5, and that is what new people, new contributors will see first. As for the timeline, this is a lot of stuff to coordinate, so I'm not going to overpromise here. I would say 2 weeks plus, depending on how many issues we encounter or if we encounter issues. It could be that we get this done sooner. It all depends on how many problems we face. I would say we meticulously planned how this will work out, but you never know like what will happen in reality, right? That's why I'm kind of cautious and going safe on 2+ weeks. But today I just created all the necessary issues that line out or sketch out what we are doing when we are doing it. You can follow that on GitHub. There's a umbrella ticket now that lists all the different steps that we are taking. Yeah, and that is where you can follow the release or the GA process. And the QR code takes you to this issue. That is all for today. Do we have any questions, any concerns, any critique, whatever else? Did I miss anything from the chat? No. Okay, I think silence is a no. In that case, thank you everyone for joining. And hopefully by the next time we speak or we see each other, we hear each other, version 5 is out. Wouldn't that be nice for a change? Yeah, see you then. Thanks for joining. Bye-bye.